I only wanted to buy milk and bread. But my late husband's old card caused a panic. They did not just freeze the account. They marched me into a private room and showed me dozens of pages of debt. The signature on every sheet was shaky like mine, but the stroke belonged to my son. That was the moment I realized he had stolen far more than just my car keys. My name is Margaret Ellison. At 62 years old, I pride myself on keeping my little house in Mapleford, Indiana, upright and clean. I am a widow. Yes. But I am not helpless. I still mow my own lawn, pay my bills on time, and drive my sedan to the supermarket every Tuesday morning without incident. Or at least, I did until this morning. I stood in my hallway, patting down the pockets of my raincoat for the third time, feeling a rising tide of confusion that I fought to suppress. My mind was sharp. I knew exactly where I had left my things. The memory of last night was vivid. My only son, Evan, had stopped by. He is 35 now, a grown man with broad shoulders and a smile that usually melts my defenses. He had been in a rush, standing in the foyer, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Mum, I just need to borrow the keyring for a night. I want to measure the garage lock cylinder size, he had said, his voice smooth and reassuring. The hardware store has a sale, and I want to upgrade your security. I'll bring them back first thing tomorrow. I had handed them over. It was a heavy bunch, containing the house key, the car key, and the small leather pouch attached to the fob where I kept my driver's license and my primary debit card. I realized my mistake only as the morning sun hit the empty hook by the door. Evan had not returned. My car was in the driveway, locked tight, and my wallet was gone with him. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but I quickly smothered it with a mother's excuses. He was busy. He probably forgot. He was trying to help me with the locks. After all, I needed groceries. I went into the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of the highboy, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and Daniel's old aftershave. Inside a small tin box lay a debit card from Fairline Union Bank. It was an old joint account, one we had used for emergencies before Daniel passed 4 years ago. I checked the date. It was still valid. It will be fine. Just for milk and bread. I whispered to the empty room. The supermarket was bustling. I placed my carton of milk and a loaf of whole wheat bread on the conveyor belt. I swiped the old blue card. The machine beeped. A harsh, dissonant sound. The screen flashed red. Card retained. I don't understand, I said, my voice trembling slightly. There is money in there. The cashier looked down, avoiding my eyes. I'm sorry, ma'am. The system says to hold the card. The bank has been notified. Before I could protest, a young woman in a sharp navy blazer approached. Her name tag read, Kayla Ortiz. I recognized her from the Fairline Union branch just across the parking lot. Mrs. Ellison Kayla asked, her voice low and professional. Would you mind coming with me to the branch? We need to verify some security information regarding your accounts. I followed her, leaving my groceries behind, my face burning with humiliation. We sat in a small, glass-walled office. The air conditioning was too cold. A printer in the corner whirred rhythmically, spitting out page after page. Kayla gathered the stack and placed it before me. Mrs. Ellison, these are the active credit lines linked to your profile, Kayla said. I looked down. My reading glasses were in my purse, which was with Evan, but I could still see the bold headers. A personal loan, 3 high-limit credit cards, a home equity line of credit. All opened within the last 8 months. I didn't sign these. I said, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. I have never seen these papers in my life. I own my house outright. I don't borrow money. Kayla looked uncomfortable. She reached over and tapped the bottom of a document. But, Mrs. Ellison, look here. I leaned in. There was a signature Margaret Ellison. The ink was slightly shaky, the loops of the G and the L mirroring my own handwriting perfectly. Next to it was a photocopy of my driver's license, the very license that was currently in Evan's pocket. That looks like my name. But I did not write it, I insisted, panic beginning to constrict my throat. You have to believe me. Kayla took a breath and clasped her hands. Her eyes held a mixture of pity and professional detachment. There is another reason the card was flagged and captured today. Mrs. Ellison, she said softly. We received a legal notification this morning. It mandates that we freeze all assets pending a review. A review for what I demanded. A petition for financial guardianship, Kayla said, sliding the final paper across the desk. The filing claims you are suffering from advanced dementia and are no longer capable of managing your estate. The petitioner requests full control of your assets to prevent you from squandering them. I stared at the name at the bottom of the request. Evan, I whispered, the air leaving my lungs. My son says I am crazy. He says you are sick. Mrs. Ellison, Kayla said quietly, and he has the paperwork to prove it. I sat in that freezing bank office, but my mind drifted back 35 years. Daniel and I built our life in Mapleford on calluses and black coffee. He was a long-haul trucker, a man who smelled of diesel and peppermint gum, who spent more nights on the interstate than in our own bed just so we could pay the mortgage on the little yellow house. I worked at Norvex Line, a logistics firm, filing papers until my fingers were stained with ink. I took the night shifts, the ones nobody wanted, because the extra pay meant Evan could go to college without taking out a loan. I wore the same winter coat for 12 years so my son could wear brand-name sneakers. We starved our own desires so he could feast on opportunities. When Daniel died of a heart attack on a lonely stretch of highway 4 years ago, my world collapsed. I was 58, alone, and terrified of the silence in the house. That was when Evan stepped in. He held me at the funeral, his suit black and crisp, looking so much like his father. Mom, from now on, I will take care of you. He had whispered into my hair, his voice thick with tears. I'm the only man left in the family. You don't have to worry about a thing. I believed him. I clung to those words like a lifeline. In the months that followed, he suggested I transfer some of my accounts to a joint status. He said online banking was the future, that paper checks were unsafe. It's all passwords and two-factor authentication now. Mom, he had said, tapping away on his smartphone. It's just too complicated for you to learn from scratch. Let me handle the bills so you can relax. I agreed. I thought I was being a burden if I refused. Then came Brianna. She worked part-time at a hair salon in the city. At first, she was sweet, bringing me casseroles and asking about my garden. But as time went on, her gaze grew cold. She started looking at my furniture, my china, and even my clothes with a detached, appraising eye. To her, I was just a rural relic, a financial illiterate sitting on a pile of equity I did not know how to use. I should have seen the signs. There were the casual questions Evan would ask over Sunday dinner. He would push the mashed potatoes around his plate, and ask about Daniel's accident settlement or the deed to the house. Dad left everything to you, right? He would ask, trying to sound casual. I mean, purely for tax reasons. We should know the numbers. It is all yours eventually. Evan. I would say, laughing it off, just not quite yet. The memory of last Thanksgiving hit me like a physical blow. We were at the table, the turkey carved, and Evan poured himself a second glass of wine. You know, Mum, the traffic on Main Street is getting crazy, he said, swirling the red liquid. If you stopped driving, I'd honestly feel a lot better. Safer. Brianna had laughed. A sharp, metallic sound. Evan just worries. Plus, think of the insurance savings. I felt a cold prickle on my neck then, but I forced a smile. He loves me, I told myself. He just worries about my safety. That was the lie I fed my intuition to keep it quiet. Over the last 2 years, the visits became rare. Evan stopped coming for dinner. Our relationship became a series of rushed video calls where he always looked tired and the conversation always turned to money. He complained about the economy, about his debts, about how hard it was to get ahead. Then came the brochures, fancy pamphlets for assisted living communities that looked like hotels. It's not a nursing home. Mum, he had insisted through the screen last month. It's a lifestyle upgrade. You would be taken care of. Better than you can take care of yourself in that big, old house. I looked down at the stack of papers on the bank table. The loans, the credit cards maxed out at casinos, the petition declaring me incompetent. I realized then that his concern was never about my safety. The help with the online banking was not to save me time, it was to blind me. The questions about the will were not about taxes, they were an inventory. He did not want to protect me. He wanted to liquidate me. My son had not just borrowed my keys last night. He had been picking the lock on my life for 4 years, waiting for the right moment to kick the door in. I stepped back into my house, but it felt like I was walking into the belly of a beast that had already swallowed me whole. I clutched the folder Kayla had given me against my chest as if it were a shield. The house was empty, yet it felt crowded with invisible threats. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, a low, drone sound that usually comforted me, but tonight it sounded like a countdown. The floorboards in the hallway creaked under my weight, and for the first time in 40 years, the sound made me jump. It felt as though the house itself was whispering that I did not belong here anymore. I sat at the kitchen table and spread the documents out under the harsh light of the overhead lamp. I forced myself to look at the numbers. There was a second mortgage taken out on this house, the house Daniel and I had paid off 10 years ago. It was for $60,000. Next to it was a credit card statement from a bank I had never walked into. The limit was $25,000, and the balance was nearly maxed out. I traced the charges with a trembling finger. The Emerald Chip Casino in Riverton City, the High Roller Lounge, a cash advance of $5,000 at 3 a.m. My eyes drifted to the dates. Most of these accounts were opened or accessed heavily starting around October 12th of last year. I froze. October 12th. That was the week I had slipped on the wet leaves in the driveway and broken my radius. I had been in the hospital for 2 days, hazy with painkillers, and Evan had insisted on holding my purse. For safekeeping. Mom, he had said. I grabbed the phone and dialed his number. My fingers felt numb. He answered on the 4th ring, and the background was filled with the thumping bass of music and the clatter of glass. "Mum, it's late." He shouted over the noise. "What's wrong? Did you find your keys?" "Evan, I am looking at a folder from the bank," I said, my voice shaking so hard I could barely form the words. "There is a mortgage. There are gambling debts. They are all in my name." He laughed. A short, dismissive bark. "Oh, that Mom. Listen, the bank's system is glitching. I already called them. Don't worry about it. Just stay inside. Okay, don't go driving around confused. It's dangerous for you." They showed me a petition. "Evan?" I said, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. "A petition for financial guardianship. It says I have dementia. It says I am losing my mind." The line went dead silent. The background noise seemed to fade away, as if he had stepped outside or covered the microphone. When he spoke again, his voice was different. It was cold. Flat. "You are sounding paranoid." "Mom? Maybe the doctors were right about the stress getting to you," he said. "Go to sleep. We will talk tomorrow." He hung up. I stared at the phone, the dial tone screaming in my ear. I did not sleep. Instead, I went to the old oak filing cabinet in the study. I pulled out every file I had, buried at the bottom of a stack of old tax returns. I found a photocopy of a letter. It was a durable power of attorney form, granting Evan Ellison full control over my medical and financial decisions effectively immediately. At the bottom was my signature. I stared at the blue ink. It was my hand. But I had never read this document. Then I remembered. The hospital bed. The morphine drip. Evan standing over me with a stack of insurance forms and hospital releases. "Just sign the corner here. Mom. And here. And one more here for the insurance," he had said, his voice soothing. He had sandwiched this power of attorney form between the admission papers. He had harvested my signature while I was high on pain medication. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I grabbed the pamphlet Kayla had slipped into the folder. There was a 24-hour hotline number for fraud. I dialed it. It rang 3 times before a click. "Fraud department," a robotic voice said. I pressed the number for urgent assistance. Eventually, a human voice came on the line. It was deep, calm, and steady. "This is Luther Graham. Internal investigations," the man said. "How can I help you tonight?" "My name is Margaret Ellison," I whispered. I think my son is stealing my life." Luther didn't interrupt. He didn't ask me if I was confused. He simply listened. "I have the file open on my screen. Mrs. Ellison," Luther said after a moment. "I see the activity. I want you to lock your doors. I am going to come to your house tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We need to secure everything." I hung up and walked into the living room. The moonlight was cutting across the room, illuminating the silver frame on the mantel. It was a picture of Daniel and me on our 30th anniversary. I picked it up, my thumbs tracing the glass over his smiling face. "Daniel," I whispered into the empty, threatening dark. "Is it true? Is our son really preparing to throw me into a nursing home just to take everything we scraped together?" The silence of the house gave me no answer, but in my heart, the terrible truth was already screaming. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It sounded like a gavel striking wood. I opened the door to find Luther Graham standing on my porch. He was a large man in a charcoal suit, with eyes that seemed tired but intensely focused. Kayla Ortiz stood beside him, clutching a leather briefcase. I invited them into the kitchen. where the morning light seemed too harsh for the conversation we were about to have. Luther declined the coffee I offered. He sat down and placed a heavy tablet on the table. Mrs. Ellison, I am an independent investigator contracted by Fairline Union Bank to handle cases of potential elder financial exploitation, Luther said, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the table. Our automated systems flagged your accounts not just because of the overdrafts, but because of the velocity of the withdrawals. Velocity, I asked, my hands gripping my cold ceramic mug. Speed, Mrs. Ellison, Luther clarified. In the banking world, when a dormant account suddenly starts maxing out daily withdrawal limits at ATMs near gaming establishments, alarms go off. But the real red flag was the legal filing received yesterday. A petition for guardianship from a firm called Westbridge and Cole. They are not local. He swiped the screen of his tablet and turned it toward me. Did you knowingly sign a document granting your son, Evan Ellison, immediate power of attorney over your estate? Luther asked, his eyes locking onto mine. No, I said firmly. Then, the memory of the hospital room washed over me again. Wait, last October, I fell. I broke my arm. I was on morphine. Evan brought a stack of papers. He said they were for insurance and hospital admission. He told me, just sign here, Mum, so we can go home. Luther looked at Kayla. It was a subtle glance, a grim tightening of the jaw that spoke volumes. Kayla nodded slightly and made a note on her legal pad. That is a classic method. Unfortunately, Luther said, turning back to me. Here is the situation. The bank has placed a hard freeze on all accounts linked to your social security number. We are opening an internal fraud investigation. However, that only protects the money currently in the bank. It does not stop the loans already taken out, or the mortgage. What can I do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You can file a formal report with Adult Protective Services and the local police for financial abuse, Luther said. We can provide the evidence package. I felt a wave of nausea. Police. You mean, have my son arrested? I can't do that. He is my only child. If I drag him to court, the whole town will know. They will look at me and see a failure of a mother who raised a criminal. I looked down at the table, shame burning my cheeks. A heavy silence filled the room. Then, I felt a warm hand on my arm. It was Kayla. Mrs. Ellison. Listen to me, Kayla said softly. My grandmother was a proud woman. She let my uncle manage her pension because she didn't want to cause a scene at Sunday church. She ended up losing her home and spending her final years in a state-funded facility that smelled of bleach and despair. Silence does not save the family. It just feeds the predator. Her words cut through my denial. I looked up, tears stinging my eyes. Luther cleared his throat. There is one more thing you need to know. In the course of our trace, we found a direct debit setup pending for next month. It is for a premium payment to a private insurer. I have life insurance, I said. Confused? Daniel paid it off years ago. This is a new policy, Mrs. Ellison, Luther said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. It was applied for 3 months ago. The face value is $750,000. The primary beneficiary is Evan Ellison. I stared at him, my mouth dry. The policy has a specific rider, Luther continued, tapping the screen. It pays out a double indemnity that means double the money in the event of accidental death. It also has an accelerated death benefit clause that releases 50% of the funds if the insured is declared permanently incapacitated. The room seemed to tilt. The pieces fell into a horrifying picture. The push for the guardianship would declare me incapacitated, releasing nearly $400,000 to him immediately. And if that failed, the accidental death clause hung in the air like a guillotine. I am not just a bank account to him. I realized, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I am an asset. I am worth more to him dead or brain damaged than I am alive. The fear that had been paralyzing me suddenly crystallized into something else. It felt cold and hard, like ice forming over a deep lake. It was no longer just about money. It was about survival. Luther reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white business card. He slid it across the table. Harold Pike, Luther said. He is an attorney in Riverton City. He specializes in asset recovery and protection for seniors. He is expensive, but he is the best. He knows how to fight this without waiting for the police to catch up. I looked at the card. Harold Pike, attorney at law. I thought of Evan tampering with the locks. I thought of the insurance policy. I thought of Daniel working double shifts in the rain to build this life. My hand reached out. My fingers were trembling, but I clamped them down on the card. I will call him, I said. I will call him today. The offices of Pike and Nolan were located on the 14th floor of a glass tower in Riverton City. The lobby smelled of expensive leather and lemon polish. I felt small in my woolen coat, clutching my purse as men in sharp suits breezed past me. I felt like a country mouse lost in a high-tech maze. But when Harold Pike walked out to greet me, that feeling vanished. He was an older man with silver hair and a kind face that reminded me of my own father. Mrs. Ellison. Please come in, Harold said, taking my hand warmly. You are safe here. Think of this room as a fortress, inside his office, overlooking the city skyline. Harold did not mince words. He laid out the legal reality of my situation with brutal clarity. Margaret, what we are looking at is textbook elder financial abuse, Harold said, leaning forward. We have elements of coerced guardianship and exploited power of attorney. If we can prove intent, and I believe we can, this is not just a family dispute. This is criminal fraud. Criminal, I asked, my voice trembling. You mean prison? I mean justice, Harold replied firmly. But first, we must stop the bleeding. I signed the retainer agreement. My hand was steady this time. I gave them permission to pull everything ATM camera footage, my hospital records, the testimony from my doctor regarding my mental state, and every single text message Evan had ever sent me. Harold then introduced me to Oscar, a forensic accountant who looked barely older than Evan but had eyes like a hawk. Oscar projected a chart onto the wall. It was a map of my financial destruction. In the last 8 months alone, over $120,000 has been siphoned from your accounts, Oscar explained, pointing to the jagged red lines. Casinos, online betting, luxury car rentals. It is a hemorrhage. I felt sick. That money was Daniel's life insurance. It was our sweat and blood. But then, Oscar clicked to a new slide. However, there is some good news. Oscar said, the debit card you tried to use at the supermarket. It is linked to a high-yield savings account that Daniel set up 10 years ago. It seems he made automatic deposits every single week from his paycheck until the day he died. He never touched it. He told me he was saving for a rainy day. I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. Well, he saved for a hurricane. Mrs. Ellison, Oscar said gently. There is nearly $85,000 in there. And because it was a separate trust account solely in his name with you as the beneficiary upon death, Evan never found it. He couldn't touch it. I wept, even from the grave. Daniel was protecting me. Harold waited for me to compose myself before outlining our strategy. It was a plan that terrified me. We need time to file the emergency injunctions and set up a new trust for your house, Harold said. To do that, we need Evan to believe he is winning. I need you to play the role he has cast you in. Be confused. Be docile. Let him think the guardianship is a done deal. For the next 2 weeks, I became an actress in my own life. When Evan called, I let my voice quaver. I don't know where I put the bills. Evan? I would stammer into the phone. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am getting too old for this big house. That's okay. Mom, he would say, his voice dripping with false sympathy. I'll handle it. I'm looking at that facility in the city again. It's for the best. Every time I hung up, I felt a desire to scream. But instead, I wrote down every word he said in a notebook for Harold. By the end of the month, I was ready. I packed a small suitcase with my most precious things, Daniel's watch, our wedding album, and the few pieces of jewelry I had left. I left the furniture. I left the clothes in the closet, using the funds from Daniel's secret account. Oscar had secured a short-term rental for me in a secure building in Riverton City. It was midnight when I walked out of my front door. I did not look back at the garden I had tended for 30 years. I got into a taxi, not my car, because Harold insisted we leave the vehicle as bait. As the taxi pulled away into the dark, the fear that had gripped me for weeks began to dissolve. I was no longer the prey waiting in the dark. I was the hunter, and I was moving into position. My new apartment in Riverton City was on the 12th floor. It was small, barely larger than my old living room, but it had a balcony that overlooked the busy streets. And most importantly, it had a steel door with a deadbolt that Evan did not have a key to. For the first time in weeks, I slept without wedging a chair under the doorknob. Kayla insisted that if I was going to fight a war, I needed to stop looking like a victim. She introduced me to a friend of hers, a stylist named Marco, who worked in a salon that smelled of expensive chemicals and techno music. I sat in his chair, gripping the armrests. We are going to take the weight off. Darling, Marco said, spinning me toward the mirror. You are hiding behind all this grey. 2 hours later, the woman staring back at me was a stranger. My hair was cut into a sharp, chic bob and dyed a rich ash brown. I wore a pair of modern, thick-rimmed glasses and a fitted blazer that Marco had picked out from a boutique down the street. I did not look like the frail widow from Mapleford anymore. I looked like someone who signed checks, not someone who begged for them. I don't recognize her, I whispered, touching my cheek. Good, Kayla said, standing behind me. Because Evan won't see her coming either. But the changes were not just on the outside. I joined a support group that met in the basement of a community center on Thursday nights. I sat in a circle with a dozen other women, listening to stories that made my blood run cold. There was a woman whose daughter had sold her house out from under her while she was in rehab for a hip surgery. Another had signed over her pension, thinking it was a renewal for a magazine subscription. Hearing them, the heavy cloak of shame I had been wearing finally slipped off. I was not a bad mother. I was just a target. I began to document everything. I bought a leather-bound journal and wrote down dates, times, and amounts. Every entry felt like a brick I was pulling out of the wall Evan had built around me. Harold arranged a visit to the Golden Horizon, the assisted living facility Evan had been pushing on me. I walked in, playing the part of the impressed potential resident. The lobby had a waterfall and smelled of lavender to cover the faint scent of antiseptic. I met with the admissions director, a woman with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Your son was very thorough," she said, tapping a file on her desk. "He wanted to make sure you had the deluxe suite with the garden view." "He is such a good boy," I said, forcing a sweet, senile smile. Did he mention the cost? I worry about money." "Oh, don't worry. Mrs. Ellison," she reassured me. "He already paid the non-refundable holding fee of $5,000 last week. He used a credit card." She turned the receipt toward me. It was a platinum card. My platinum card. The one I had never applied for. I smiled through the rage, thanked her, and discreetly took a photo of the receipt with my new smartphone. He was using my own stolen credit to pay for my cell. I became better with the phone, too. Harold taught me how to use a recording app. Now, when Evan called, I was ready. I learned to guide the conversation, playing the confused, helpless old lady to perfection. "Evan, I just don't understand why the bank says I owe so much money," I would say, making my voice wobble. "Did I buy something? I forgot, Mom. We talked about this." Evan would sigh, his impatience leaking through. "You're forgetting things. I'm handling the debts. You just need to sign the papers so I can fix your mess. Trust me. I do trust you." "Honey?" I said, while watching the recording timer tick upward on my screen. I just want it all to be over. "It will be soon," he said. I felt a dark, dangerous thrill. I realized I could control his breathing, his mood, his entire plan, just by pretending to be the weak thing he thought I was. Then came the call I was waiting for. "Mom." I made an appointment with the lawyers at Westbridge and Cole for Friday. Evan said, sounding urgent. "We need to finalize the guardianship. The bank is threatening to seize the house if we don't get legal control. You have to come." "Oh dear," I said, letting a gasp escape. Yes. Yes. Of course. I don't want to lose the house. I'll be there." "Evan?" "Good," he said. "I'll pick you up." "No. No." I insisted gently. "I am already in the city visiting a friend. I will take a cab. I will meet you there." I hung up and immediately dialed Harold. He took the bait. I said, my voice steady and cold. "We are ready." Harold replied. "Luther has already spoken to the judge. We have authorization to wire the conference room. Just get him to talk." "Margaret, get him to say it out loud." I looked at my reflection in the darkened window of my apartment. The woman looking back wasn't smiling. She was ready to hunt. I arrived at the offices of Westbridge and Cole with Evan's hand clamped firmly around my upper arm. He was not guiding me. He was restraining me. As we walked through the reception area, he raised his voice, pitching it loud enough for the secretaries to hear. "Careful with your step." "Mom," Evan said, pulling me slightly off balance. "You know how dizzy you get. I don't want you falling again like last time." I kept my head down and shuffled my feet, playing the part of the confused geriatric. Underneath my coat, the small microphone taped to my collarbone felt hot against my skin. We entered the conference room. It was stark and cold, dominated by a long mahogany table. A young lawyer with a sharp suit and a sharper haircut sat waiting for us. He looked at me, not as a person, but as a file to be closed. "Mrs. Ellison, please sit," the lawyer said, sliding a thick document across the polished wood. "This is the petition for conservatorship. Given the medical reports regarding your cognitive decline, we believe this is the safest path forward." I looked at the papers. On top was a medical evaluation dated 3 months ago. It described a patient with advanced memory loss and spatial disorientation. I had never met the doctor who signed it. Evan sighed, a heavy, tragic sound. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "I hate doing this." "Mum," he said, looking at the lawyer with wet, pleading eyes. "But I am terrified she is going to get scammed or hurt. She leaves the stove on. She forgets to pay bills. I just want to make sure she is safe." I stared blankly at the wall. But inside, I was counting every lie. 1, 2, 3. "Mrs. Ellison," the lawyer prompted. "Do you understand what we are discussing?" I blinked slowly and looked at the young man. Evan squeezed my hand under the table. It was a warning squeeze. "If I sign this," I started, my voice trembling perfectly. "If I agree, does that mean Evan handles everything? The bank accounts, the house, the insurance?" Evan nodded eagerly. "Yes. Mom, I'll handle the stress. You won't have to worry about a single penny." I turned to the lawyer. "Everything. He can sell the house. He can change the beneficiaries on my policies?" The lawyer nodded professionally. "Yes. Mrs. Ellison, the conservatorship grants your son plenary power over your estate. He would have full legal authority to liquidate assets for your care and manage all financial instruments." I felt the microphone vibrate slightly against my chest. That was it. He had just confirmed on record that the goal was total control. "I see," I whispered. "Then just sign here." "Mom," Evan said, sliding a pen into my hand. "Let's go home." I held the pen. I let it hover over the paper. Evan's eyes were glued to the tip of the pen, hungry and impatient. Just as the ink was about to touch the page, the heavy double doors of the conference room swung open. Harold Pike walked in, looking like a storm cloud in a pinstripe suit. Behind him was Luther Graham and a stern woman holding a government ID badge. "I advise you not to sign that." "Margaret," Harold said, his voice booming off the glass walls. Evan jumped up, knocking his chair back. "Who the hell are you? This is a private meeting." "I am Harold Pike, attorney for Mrs. Ellison," Harold said, walking to the table and slamming a folder down on top of the guardianship papers. "And we are filing an immediate motion to dismiss this petition on the grounds of fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse." The young lawyer looked from Evan to Harold, his face draining of colour. "What is this?" "My client is your client," Luther interrupted, stepping forward and tossing a stack of photos onto the table. "Has visited the Emerald Chip Casino 14 times in the last 2 months. He has withdrawn over $12,000 from his mother's accounts at ATMs located inside the casino. And this," Luther slapped a document down, "is a second mortgage application with a signature that forensic experts have already confirmed is a forgery." The room went silent. The air was sucked out of the space. Evan looked down at the photos of himself at a blackjack table, then at the bank statements. His face turned a deep, blotchy red. This is a misunderstanding," Evan stammered, his voice cracking. "I was managing her money. She doesn't understand finances. She gave me permission." The woman from the family court stepped forward. "Mr. Ellison, I am Inspector Davis. I have a court order authorizing the recording of this meeting. Your confirmation that you intended to take full control of the assets, combined with this evidence, is very damaging." Evan spun around to face me. He looked wild, desperate. "Mom, tell them. Tell them you told me to take the money. Tell them you're sick." I looked at him. I stopped hunching my shoulders. I took off the glasses Marco had picked out for me and set them on the table. I sat up straight, my spine stiff with dignity. "I am not sick." "Evan?" I said, my voice clear and steady. "Mom." He breathed, stepping back as if I had slapped him. I looked him dead in the eye. My hands were on the table, not trembling, not anymore. "You are not asking the court to protect me." "Evan," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "You are asking the court to open the door so you can clean me out of your life." The young lawyer slowly closed his laptop, distancing himself from Evan. My son stood there, mouth open, as the trap he had built for me snapped shut around his own ankle. The headline on the Riverton Gazette was not subtle. It read, "Secret Mortgage Scheme. Alleged local widow fights forced guardianship." I sat in a booth at a diner in the city, tracing the bold black letters with my finger. Fairline Union Bank had issued a press release stating they were cooperating with authorities regarding irregularities in senior accounts. And while they did not print my name, the details were specific enough. In a town the size of Mapleford, anonymity is a myth. Everyone knew who the widow was, and everyone knew who the son was. Above the counter, the diner television was tuned to the local news. I froze as I saw Harold Pike's face on the screen. He was sitting next to Kayla. "We are seeing an epidemic," Harold was saying to the reporter. "Adult children who view their parents not as family, but as living ATMs. They bleed the accounts dry and then use the legal system to silence the victim." I looked around the diner, fearing someone would recognize me, but nobody looked my way. I was just another woman eating a Cobb salad. However, back in Mapleford, the atmosphere was shifting. Mrs. Gable, my next-door neighbor for 20 years, texted me. She said Evan had been coming to the house every day, rattling the locked gates. She told me the neighbors used to wave at him, but now they pulled their blinds down when his truck pulled up. The devoted son narrative was crumbling. The biggest crack in Evan's defense came from an unexpected place. Brianna. Harold called me in the afternoon with news that made my jaw drop. He had subpoenaed Brianna for a deposition. She had walked in, expecting to defend her husband, thinking she was fighting for her future inheritance. Instead, Harold showed her the debt. He showed her that the loans were not just in my name, but cross-collateralized in a way that threatened her own credit score. She cracked. "Margaret," Harold told me over the phone. She realized she wasn't waiting for a payday. She was waiting for bankruptcy. According to Harold, Brianna had started crying halfway through the interview. She confessed something that chilled me to the bone. He made us practice. Brianna had stammered to the court reporter. He brought home old birthday cards from his mother. He told me to copy the signature. He said, "It's just a game, babe. Like calligraphy." I didn't know he was putting it on loan applications. With that admission, Evan was no longer just a bad son. He was a forger. Emboldened. I accepted an invitation to speak on a regional radio show. I sat in the soundproof booth, the red, on-air light glowing like a warning beacon. "My name is Margaret," I said into the microphone. my voice steady. And I want to tell you how I almost lost my life because I was too polite to say no to my own child. The phone lines lit up. Story after story poured in from listeners. I realized I had tapped into a silent, festering wound in our community. I was not alone. Evan did not take this well. That evening, a video appeared on social media. It was Evan, filming himself in his car. He looked disheveled, his eyes wild and red-rimmed. My mother she is being brainwashed by these lawyers. Evan shouted at the camera, spitting as he spoke. She is sick. She doesn't know what she is saying. I tried to help her. And now she wants to keep all the money for herself while I struggle. It's selfish. He tried to play the victim. But the internet is a cruel judge. Within hours, local users had dug up photos of him popping champagne at the High Roller Lounge in Riverton City. The comments section turned into a slaughter. Nice watch. Evan. Did Mum pay for that too? One user wrote. Another posted a screenshot of his new truck with the caption, "The National Son of the Year." The public humiliation was satisfying, but what happened next was final. Harold called me late that night. His voice was grim but satisfied. "Margaret?" "I just got off the phone with the district attorney," Harold said. "They have reviewed the bank records, the signature analysis, and Brianna's sworn statement. They are not waiting for the civil trial." "What does that mean?" I asked, clutching the phone. "It means the state is stepping in," Harold said. "They are charging Evan with felony financial exploitation of the elderly and multiple counts of second-degree forgery. This isn't a lawsuit anymore. Margaret, it is a criminal prosecution." The criminal charges had cost Evan his job at the local construction firm. The rumors in town had hardened into concrete walls that shut him out. But the real danger was not the law. It was a man named Tanner Holt. Harold told me later that Holt was a loan shark who did not care about credit scores, only about collection. He had given Evan 48 hours to pay a debt that was spiraling out of control. Driven by a panic, I can only imagine. Evan drove back to Mapleford in the dead of night. He stood outside the house he grew up in, likely thinking it was still his safety net. But he found the locks changed. He found the deed transferred into an irrevocable trust. He was locked out of the brick and mortar. That left him with one final, terrible option. The insurance policy. The one that paid double for accidental death before the guardianship trial could strip him of his beneficiary status. I was awake in my apartment in Riverton City when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was 2:13 in the morning. The screen glowed with a crimson notification from the security app Luther had installed. Alert garage door opened. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I did not panic. I pressed the speed dial for Luther. I see it. Margaret. Luther answered on the first ring, his voice crisp and awake. "I am watching the live feed. He is inside. I have already dispatched the Mapleford police. Do not look away." I opened the video feed on my tablet. The grainy black and white footage showed a figure moving in the shadows of my garage. It was Evan. He used a duplicate key. I did not know he had to roll up the side door. He was not trying to break into the kitchen. He was kneeling beside my sedan. I watched, horrified, as he pulled a tool roll from his jacket. He was not stealing the car. He was sliding underneath it. "What is he doing?" I whispered to the empty room, my hand covering my mouth. "He is tampering with the brake lines," Luther said, his voice cold as ice. "He is trying to make sure the next time you drive, you do not stop." I watched the screen as silent tears streamed down my face. On the video, red and blue lights suddenly flashed against the garage walls. The main door began to rise. Evan scrambled out from under the car, dropping a wrench, looking like a deer caught in the headlights. Officers swarmed him. I saw him throw his hands up, shouting something I could not hear, but I knew he was trying to sell one last lie. 2 hours later, I walked into the interrogation room at the county precinct. Evan was handcuffed to the table. He looked small. He looked like the boy who used to scrape his knees playing soccer, but his eyes were those of a desperate stranger. "Mum!" He cried out when he saw me, trying to lunge forward but stopped by the chain. "Mum, tell them I was just fixing the car. I knew you were coming back to get clothes, and I wanted to make sure it was safe. I was fixing the brakes." I sat down slowly in the metal chair opposite him. I placed my tablet on the table and pressed play. The video showed him clearly cutting into the line. It showed him loosening the valve to ensure the fluid would leak out slowly over miles. Not immediately. "We have the video?" "Evan?" I said softly. "It is not what it looks like," he shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. I was helping. "Why won't you believe me?" I leaned forward. I did not scream. I did not cry. I felt a cold, hard clarity that was more painful than any grief I had ever known. "Did you need me dead so badly that you were willing to let my car slide off the highway?" "Evan," I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Was the insurance money worth watching my funeral? He opened his mouth to lie again, but the words died in his throat. He slumped back in his chair, the reality of what he had done finally silencing him. The district attorney did not hesitate. By sunrise, the charges against Evan had escalated from financial fraud to attempted reckless endangerment with intent to cause serious bodily harm. There would be no plea deal for a misunderstanding. My son had gambled his freedom on my death, and he had lost. The county courthouse was packed, the air thick with the scent of floor wax and nervous sweat. I sat in the front row, flanked by Harold and Kayla like two guardian angels in business suits. Behind me, I could hear the murmurs of the women from my support group who had come to stand witness. When the bailiff opened the side door, the room went silent. Evan shuffled in. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame, and his wrists were bound in chains. He looked at me, his eyes darting between defiance and terrified desperation, but I did not look away. The prosecutor was a sharp woman who did not waste time with theatrics. She laid out the timeline of betrayal like a builder laying bricks. She detailed the unauthorized loans, the credit cards maxed out at casinos, and the forged signatures on the mortgage documents. She held up the receipt for the non-refundable deposit at the nursing home, paid for with my own stolen money. Finally, she described the petition for guardianship, calling it a legal weapon designed to strip me of my human rights. Luther and Kayla took the stand. They explained how the bank's algorithm had flagged the sudden draining of my accounts, and how the freezing of Daniel's old card, the card I had tried to use for milk and bread, had been the domino that toppled the entire scheme. Then came the video. The lights in the courtroom dimmed, and the large monitor on the wall flickered to life. The grainy black and white footage showed the interior of my garage. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery as everyone watched Evan slide underneath my sedan. The light from his phone illuminated his hands as he worked the wrench, loosening the brake line just enough to cause a failure at high speed. It was undeniable. It was not a son fixing a car. It was an executioner setting a trap. I took the stand last. My voice did not shake as I recounted the last month. I spoke of the morning I lost my keys, the humiliation at the bank, and the moment I realized the man I had given birth to viewed me as nothing more than an expiring asset. Evan's defense attorney tried to paint a picture of a man drowning in debt, a man who had lost his way but never intended real harm. He was desperate, the lawyer argued. He was trying to manage the estate. There is no direct proof he wanted his mother dead, only that he was negligent. It was a weak argument, and it crumbled the moment Evan decided to speak during his allocation. He turned to me, tears streaming down his face, his voice cracking. "Mom, I was just trying to protect you." He sobbed, leaning over the defense table. "I wanted to control the finances so you wouldn't worry. The car was just a misunderstanding. I was fixing it. Please, tell them you believe me." The courtroom waited. I looked at the man who had once been my little boy. I remembered the nights I worked extra shifts for his college tuition. I remembered the way he had held my hand at Daniel's funeral. And then I remembered the cold, metallic click of the wrench in the video. "I have spent my life believing every explanation you ever gave me." "Evan," I said, my voice ringing clear in the silence. "I made excuses for your greed. I called it ambition. I made excuses for your cruelty. I called it stress. But today, for the first time, I choose to believe what you do, not what you say." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts of elder financial abuse. Guilty of second-degree forgery. Guilty of attempted reckless endangerment with intent to cause bodily harm. The judge was unsparing. He sentenced Evan to 15 years in a state penitentiary, along with a mandate for full financial restitution. As the bailiff pulled Evan up to lead him away, the chains rattled a harsh, final sound. He twisted around, his face contorted in panic. "Mom," he screamed, the word raw and broken. "Mom, don't let them take me," I did not answer. I gripped the wooden armrest of my chair until my knuckles turned white, feeling a terrible, hollow ache in my chest. It was the pain of a severance more violent than birth. But as the door closed behind him, the pain was replaced by a sudden, overwhelming lightness. The cord was cut. I walked out of the courthouse and onto the wide stone steps. The reporters were there, microphones raised. But I walked past them. I did not need to give them a soundbite. I stood by the railing and took a deep breath of the cool afternoon air. The sky was a heavy, slate grey, but to me, it looked beautiful. I looked up at the clouds and spoke to the only man who had ever truly protected me. "You did it, Daniel," I thought, closing my eyes. "That old card of yours, it saved my life. And it gave me the chance to save myself. I will not give the rest of my years to anyone else. They belong to me now." Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can connect. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Hit that like button and give us a hype to help share this message with others who might need to hear it.